you're going to talk to us a little bit about building, a successful staff. Certainly something that I'm interested in. We're adding a new staff member in our JV coach this year. But I think coaches in general, how do you build that staff? This is going to be great for us to hear about. So I'll let you introduce yourself the rest of the way and then just kind of take it from here.
Well, I appreciate it, Coach Dennis. And I appreciate you putting the coaching clinic together, because anytime coaches can come together and share information and learn from each other, I just think that's an awesome opportunity for us to grow in our profession. So welcome, everyone. My name is Jim Horn. I'm the head men's basketball coach at Combs Valley Community College. And I'm going to talk to you today about building a successful staff. Thinking back over my playing career and coaching career, and just thinking back, even back to youth sports, and thinking about all the successful teams either I played on or coached with, and having a solid staff in place, to me, is the first step of success for your program. So building a successful staff, to me, is super important, because just like the quote here from Coach Wooden, a coach must never forget that he is a leader and not merely a person with authority. And so building a successful staff, to me, is building a group of leaders, and putting the right people in place on your staff is so important. And so I'm just going to talk to you a little bit today about my experience of putting staffs together and being on staffs, and what I thought were key areas, key components of having a successful staff, which in turn helps you build a successful program. But before I move on from that, I'm thinking back. Like, I want you to think back in your playing careers and your coaching careers, and think about some of the successful teams you played for, and the staffs they had, and the people that were involved as leaders in the program. And one of my first or earliest memories of a coach and a staff that really impacted me as an athlete was Little League Baseball. I'm 10, 11, 12 years old. I made the All-Star team, and there was one particular coach that would be on the All-Star team staff that I just loved playing for, and just remember, during the year, you'd have a certain group of coaches that coach your team, but when you went to the All-Stars, it was a group of coaches. And this one particular coach I never played for in Little League, but every time I made the All-Stars, he was on the coaching staff, and just what an impact he made on me. So putting a staff together, and a quality staff, building a successful staff, it doesn't just happen. It takes time, it takes commitment of due diligence of putting the right group together. So just going to talk about a few things that can help you as you're putting a staff together, things that you'll want to think about and keep in mind as you're moving forward. So 5 areas, and we'll get into each one of these a little deeper as we go through the presentation here, but 5 areas to consider when you're building your staff. And these are things that you need to sit down and think about, write out, talk about with your top staff members if you're bringing someone on board, or other mentor coaches that you've worked with that you trust. These areas you need to really think about as you're putting your staff together. So first is, what is your philosophy for basketball? We'll get into this more and more, but that is the first thing you need to think about. And as you're putting a staff together, what kind of people are going to help build your philosophy and move your program and the identity of your philosophy, which is the second one. What do you want the identity of your program to be? Third thing, and this is one we'll get into a little deeper and talk about, and is super important, is what are your strengths and weaknesses as a coach? Identifying those. And fourth, how big of staff can you manage? And then the last thing we'll talk about is what resources are available to you and your staff. So there are a lot of things that go into it, but I think if you can focus on these 5 areas and really get a handle on these as you're putting your staff together, it will help you make the right decisions when you're bringing someone on board. And in the end, you know, just like Coach Wooden's quote is, you know, we're leaders, and your staff is going to be the leaders of your team. And then hopefully you'll develop leaders on your team, and so on and so forth. And that's how you build a successful program and a successful group of individuals. So focusing on these areas and really doing your work in these areas of what you really want to see will help you as you build your staff. So first thing, you know, what is your philosophy? There are a lot of different definitions of philosophy. I think I looked up like 32 different philosophies. And this one I picked out because it was one that was similar to, I took a coaching class a long time ago when I was in school, and it almost was identical to the philosophy definition that was given to me in class. It's a set of ideas, standards, or beliefs used to describe behavior or thought. So when you're thinking about your philosophy for basketball, you know, what do you believe, or how do you believe the game should be played? What's important? What are the standards that you want to set in your program? What do you believe is necessary to be successful? And how do you want that behavior and that thought process to be developed in your team? And, you know, that's super important, because when you're bringing people on staff and you're building your staff, we need to be moving in a direction towards your philosophy, and having the right people in place to support that, build that, and direct your players is vital to the success of your program. So first thing is, you know, and philosophies change, right? You'll start your coaching career out with a certain philosophy and a certain style that you want to play, a certain identity you want your team to have, and that may change over time. When I first started coaching, you know, I was probably a defense first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. I mean, I look back at some of my early practice plans, and we would spend, you know, a 2-hour practice, we would spend 60 to 70% on defense. And I'm sure my guys hated it, you know, and that was my philosophy. And that's what I thought needed to be done. That was my idea. That was my standards, my beliefs. I wanted my players to behave in a defensive minded process. Now the game has changed a lot, and I've changed in that aspect too, though I do believe I'm still a defense first guy, but maybe not as much. But an example is Brad Stevens at the BCAM, when he was still coaching with Butler, and he came to BCAM. This was, 7-8 years ago, before he left for Boston. I remember him specifically saying that his philosophy and his beliefs and what they would preach at Butler was, if we win the rebound, turnover, and 50-50 battles, we'll be a winning program. And, you know, his identity for his program was toughness. We outwork people, and, you know, rebound, turnover, 50-50 battles, you know, that was their identity. And so that's a great example of understanding your philosophy. And, you know, he had a staff in place that preached that and worked with the guys to help set that standard, set those beliefs, so to move the process along in the thought process of the players. So your staff will have a direct impact on whether the team buys into your philosophy or not. It's one thing to hear it from the head coach. It's another thing to start hearing it from the assistant coaches. And then it's another thing to start hearing it from your captains and your players. And that's when you're really going to start to see the success happen. So understanding your philosophy, and it's not that, you don't have to have a coach come in and totally flip his philosophy and just be 100% your philosophy, but he has to buy into, or she has to buy into your philosophy and your style and support you while they're your assistant, while they're on your staff, to move in that direction. All along, they're building their own philosophy. And that's so important. You want to have people who are on the right page. You share your philosophy with people. I'll just share this before I move on out of philosophy. I interviewed for a job at a college one time, and the coach, he asked me 10 specific questions, and one of them was, if you had your choice between a player being very tough or very skilled, what would you take? And, you know, that was a really good question. And for a second, you know, I had to stop and think about it for a second, you know. And, you know, do you think You want a real tough kid. And the thing is, that's a question, right? I mean, is this tough kid at least a pretty good player, or is the tough guy terrible? That's kind of the question. But it was really about the mentality of what he wanted his staff and the identity of his team. And I chose skill, and he was a toughness coach. And later, because I didn't get the job, later we talked about it, and he was like, I'm trying to build a tough-minded program, and I want people on staff with me that are about toughness. Hey, that's fine, and that's what you want to do, and that's exactly what I'm talking about when you're trying to build your philosophy. And the people on staff, you have to have people that are right on board with that. Now, I am a toughness guy. And I could have fit in. I could have been on that staff and worked towards toughness because I believe that too. It was just, I'm not the head coach. I would be right along with them. Yep, we're promoting toughness because I could buy into that. So when you're looking at your staff, it's not necessary that they have to be right on track with you 100%, but if they support you and will build it, then we can work with that. So the second thing is your team's identity is driven by your philosophy. What do you want the identity of your team to be? Buy into your philosophy creates habits that develop your team's identity. And that has to be promoted through the head coach, through the assistant coaches, onto the captains, right on down through the whole team. So understanding your philosophy is the first step, and then creating that identity, it's driven by your philosophy. So let's just look at a couple examples, and I have some more examples about how your philosophy may change as you coach, which in turn the identity of your team will change too. But let's just think of the NBA recently with the bubble situation, and even this year the whole season. You look at the Houston Rockets, and everybody knows when you say Houston Rockets, ISO ball, 3-point shot, and then they come along and decide we're going to do the small ball concept. That was a big term being used through the media about the Houston Rockets, 3-point small ball concept. So your team will have an identity, and that's driven by your philosophy. The second example, I just threw this out here because I thought it was really a good one, is that I never really considered the Lakers a defensive-minded team, but Frank Vogel's a defense-first guy. He goes to the Lakers, and they bring in Anthony Davis, and Anthony Davis said, I want to be Defensive Player of the Year. He gets LeBron to commit to play defense, and so on and so forth. I thought they played pretty good defense throughout the playoffs. I thought they were probably one of the better defensive teams in the league. And so, you would hear the media talk about their defense. I thought they were great at scrambling to the threes when they played teams that could shoot the three. And they did a really nice job with that. So your identity is driven by your philosophy. So what you bring to the table as a coach and then as a staff on down through the program will determine your identity. What do you want your identity to be? And like I said, that can change. So my big example is, and I didn't put this one on here, but my big example is Coach Krzyzewski. He played for Bobby Knight. He was a defense-minded coach. He was a motion offense coach. Back when they first started getting to the national level, they ran motion offense, and they were a defensive-minded team. They controlled the ball. They controlled the tempo. And each decade, Coach Krzyzewski has done a fantastic job of modifying his philosophy. The team's identity has changed. In the recent years, they've been teams that have shot the most threes or in the top 5 of shooting threes in college basketball. And Coach Krzyzewski used to be a guy of, hey, I'm going to have 4-year guys. Then my philosophy is I want 4-year guys here. I'm going to, develop. And then he went to the one and done, and he's found success with that too. So your philosophy will change, and therefore your identity will change, but your identity is driven by your philosophy. Your staff helps create the habits that determine your team's identity. You determine the philosophy, you get the buy-in. Now we're going to be creating an identity for our team. This is done by the way we practice, the way we run our team, and the staff plays a huge role in creating those habits to determine that team's identity. So you need to be thinking about that when you're bringing someone on staff. You know, will they help me develop my team's identity? Will they buy into the philosophy? They don't have to have the exact same philosophy, but will they buy into the philosophy? And then will they help me create the habits that will determine our team's identity? And you see this all the time. You know, coaches and staffs definitely help determine how the team is going to be identified. So that's another area to think about. This next one, the third one, and I think this is possibly the most important one, is for you to sit down and think about your strengths and your weaknesses. What strengths do you have and what weaknesses do you have? So you can bring on people who can not just help your weaknesses, support your strengths, develop them more, but also help with your weaknesses. The tough part about that as a head coach is you have to be able to admit your weaknesses and then allow other staff members to have some control in those areas of your program. And if you don't have someone that you know and trust, you might be hiring someone or bringing someone on staff that you know a little about, whether, you know, you get references or you know, people, they apply, you like what you see, you bring them on, and now you have to trust them with a part of your program. And that's kind of where it goes back to Coach Wooden's being a leader and not just someone in authority, my way or the highway. You know, we're going to allow this person who has shown they have these strengths to come in. It's a weakness in our program, take over that part, or at least have some control of that part, because ultimately you as the head coach have control, and allow them to do their thing. You know, a good example to me was when Beeline hired Yaklich to come in and be the defensive coach for University of Michigan before he left for Cleveland. Michigan became one of the best defensive teams in the nation. That was Coach Beeline saying, you know what, I'm an offensive coach. Everybody knows it. I've got to bring someone in who's going to change our defensive philosophy, change our defensive approach, get us a defensive identity. And he was able to do that. He brought in someone who was able to do that. That, to me, is how you build, one of the big ways how you build a successful staff. So, you know, like I said, you know, identifying your strengths and weaknesses and being able to yield your weaknesses over to somebody can be a tough thing as a coach. But if it's done correctly, it will benefit your program and your staff tremendously. So the next one that we're going to look at is, and this one is huge because, you know, I know lots of coaches that would love to have, you know, at high school level or small college level, run their programs like a D1 program. So think about this before you start going in that direction. What size staff is manageable for you? Do you feel comfortable with a large staff? You may want a large staff, but do you feel comfortable having a large staff? Or do you feel comfortable having a smaller staff? Do you feel comfortable and have time to run a large staff where you have large staff meetings and then one-on-one individual meetings with your coaches, which are so important? So you may want to have a big staff, but is it, do you have the capability to manage staff, a large staff? When managing a staff, the goal is to help every staff member grow in their role of moving the team towards the philosophy and style of play that you want to be known for. Move towards your philosophy, move towards that identity, play the way you want to play, and continue to help grow your staff, help them move in the right direction. Not all assistant coaches want to move on to be head coaches, but most of them do. So when you're managing a staff, you're managing them to, number one, help your team be the best it can be. But then number two, you're trying to help manage them grow as a person who potentially could take over a program. When I was coaching high school basketball, my first head coaching job, I was the JV head coach at Kalamazoo College for Joe Hacklin. I didn't have an assistant coach. I was the head JV coach, but I was also a varsity assistant coach. I didn't have to manage any staff. I was being managed as I was a head coach. When I took my first high school job, that was my first time ever having the potential to have a staff, but my first year, I did not have an assistant coach. Looking back, you know, when you're first starting out, you think you can do it all. You've got your ideas. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. It's impossible to have a successful program as a one-man show. So the next couple years, I connected with Western Michigan University, and I started getting coaching interns through Western Michigan University. And for the next 6 years, I had up to 3 interns every year coaching basketball with our program, and our program grew tremendously. I was able to share my philosophy. I was able to share our identity that we wanted to be. They bought into it. They all had their own philosophies as well and wanted to be head coaches. And I think in that 6 years that I had probably around 12 different coaches, because a couple of them stayed with me for 2 to 3 years at a time. 5 of them have gone on to be head coaches. And one has a super successful program down in the state of Florida at a high school. Jason Price is doing a fantastic job down there. And he was with me for 2 years in high school. My point was, I couldn't do it by myself. I didn't want a huge staff. The largest staff I had was 4. And we were able to run meetings and have individual meetings with no problem. And it was, you know, a nice size for me at the time. So knowing what your capabilities of, what you're comfortable with, and what you can manage is super important, because here's the thing you don't want to do. You don't want to have so many people on board that you cannot help them, number one, be impactful on your team in the process that you're trying to put together, and then stunt their growth or stop them from moving in the direction they want to go for their individual goals in coaching. So, and that's a really important thing to think about as a leader. It goes back to what Coach Wooden said. You're not just the authority, but you're the leader. You're trying to develop people. You're trying to help people. So what size staff can you manage? You know, can you manage a large staff? Can you manage a small staff? You'll have to figure that out and find what's best for you and what works for you as an individual. But good staff management has a direct impact on the buy-in from your team to create a successful program. So making sure you're meeting the needs of your staff, which in turn meets the needs of your team. So the last thing that I wanted to talk to you about is what resources are available for you and your staff. This will play a big role in putting your staff together as well, because going back to strengths and weaknesses, some of the resources you have, you may not be able to use without specific staff members. So it's a good thing to think about. When you take over a program or you're starting a program, you need to look at all the resources that are available for you to use. And then, are you capable of using all those resources? And if not, what kind of staff members can you bring on to help you in that area? A good example for me was when I took the Portage Northern varsity job. They have an awesome facility they have a couple weight rooms and a couple nice areas to work out. And it's not that I wasn't capable of weight room. When you're doing a lot of things as a coach, if you can find someone who's better at it and can benefit your team more, why not use that resource? So the first year we were using it, but we weren't really maximizing what could be done. And Pete Skirmahorn, who's the head football coach and strength and conditioning coach there, came to me and said, "Coach, if you want to, I will put a program together. I'll run a program for the basketball team. They could come in with the football guys and work out." And I said, "Wow, that's awesome. I would love to use that resource." And so he did. And for the next 3 years that I was there, Coach Skirmhorn ran an awesome strength and conditioning program for our guys, which benefited our program tremendously. So what kind of resources are available for your staff? Now, if coach wasn't available, my next step would have been, can I bring someone on staff that really could run a strong strength and conditioning program for us, because we had those resources available and we weren't maximizing those resources. So which staff members are best with your resources? Another example would be like video. As the head coach, you're not running video. You're not videotaping the games when you're playing or videotaping practice when you're working. Do you have someone in place that can run video? Do you have access to video? And if you do you have someone who knows how to run it right? At KVCC, Tom Carson's been running video for us forever. I was on staff with Coach Dennis and Coach Schultz back in the mid-2000s, and Tom was video back then. Tom has done a great job. He has a system in place. As we've moved through different programs to use video, break down video, Tom has been great at learning that system and using it, and he does a fantastic job for us. So we have someone who's on staff with us that completely takes over the video situation. We don't have to worry about it, and it's a win-win for everybody. Now, I remember one of my first jobs coaching was a grad assistant job at Stetson University, and we were in charge of the video. And so, like I said, the head coach is not going to do that. Somebody's got to be in charge of that. And I remember back then it was tough because it was all VHS. We had dual VHS recorders where we could take a blank tape in games and cut certain parts of the game and put it on there for practice. It was a mess, but we did it. And now having someone who's up to date and can run Huddle or Synergy or whatever you run and do a good job with it, it's fantastic. So what resources are available for your staff? What staff is in place, or do you need to bring someone and put them in place to do certain things for you if you have resources available? Find all the resources available, identify staff members who can utilize them to best create a successful program. One more thing on that before we get ready to wrap things up here. For my situation, and Coach Dennis can relate to this, being the former head coach at Kelms Valley Community Colleges, academics. At KVCC, we have a lot of resources for our guys, and we have the ability to help any player get through academically. But the problem is we don't have the resources to get them to the resources. They have to get there themselves. Pretty much there are tutoring, academic programs in place to help any student, including the basketball program, if they go and use it. So they have to go to the help lab. They have to go to the tutors. We don't walk them to, well, we do actually walk them there and show them where it's at, but we're not walking them every day if they need help or if they're using a tutor. So one of the things, two things I decided to do. One was I decided one of our staff members was going to be in charge of academics. And Coach Matt Bullinger, for the last 2 years, has done a fantastic job, set up an awesome system of following up with our guys and staying on top of academics. And the other thing is we had to change our recruiting philosophy. We were able to bring in talented players. The athleticism was fantastic. But my first couple of years, we just didn't have the kids that were committed to academics. And we needed more self-sufficient student athletes. And so we changed our recruiting philosophy, and we made Coach Bullinger, we have the resources that are available, but we weren't utilizing them the right way. So we changed, we gave one of our staff members an opportunity to grow and put something together, and he did, and it's been fantastic. And last year was the first year we didn't lose anybody to academics halfway through the year. And it was our highest GPA since I've been there, of a 2.9 overall GPA. Our goal is to be at a 3.0, but we had 5 guys in the spring that were all conference academic, which was fantastic for us. So that is where you're looking at a resource that we can use. We weren't really utilizing it the way we should. So we identified a staff member who could use that. He took on the challenge and has done a fantastic job with it. So what resources are available for your staff, and do you have staff members who can utilize those resources to create success in your program? So I'll wrap it up with this. 5 things that I think is very important as you're building a successful staff is understanding your philosophy, your program identity, and the style of play you want to play. Identify your strengths and weaknesses as a coach. What size staff and resources are available to your program that you can manage and do it in a way that's going to benefit everybody in the program, staff, players, everybody. And when you look at those things, how much emphasis, building a successful staff will be determined on how much emphasis you put into these areas of your program. So you can identify staff members who can help maximize the potential and success of your program. So it takes time. You have to look at those areas. You have to think about those things and really put some time and energy and effort into figuring out where your priorities are when it comes to that, so you can bring on staff or build a staff that will be successful and help build your program. So I'll open it up for some questions and answers. I'd like to hear a couple of some feedback about what you think about building a successful coaching staff. The other thing is, I hope our practices open back up sometime soon. I don't know how that's going to work out, but if we do open back up, we practice 4 to 6 every day, and would love to have you guys, anybody who wants to come out, see a practice. Also, you can feel free to reach out anytime to jhorn@kvcc.edu. That's my email. Share information. If you know of players that you think could be a potential player at KVCC level for you high school coaches, we're always looking and love to hear from you about that. So yeah, any questions, answers, willing to answer any questions and go from there. But 5 key areas: philosophy, your identity, resources, your size of managing your staff, and focus on being a leader, like Coach Wooden said, and leading people to help build them as players and coaches. So thanks for your time, guys. I appreciate it.